Ofir, good morning, brother. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate you spending your Saturday with me, man. All right, so Ofir, you've done a lot of things. I saw your bio. There's like 10 different things that you've done over the last handful of years. So maybe just tell me in your own words what you've been up to over the last little bit.
Yeah, so I'm a business ops guy, specifically in the online space. So people come to me typically when their business is broken, they need something fixed, and then they typically stay with me
Mm,
to make sure things function properly.
So describe to me what that means to you, business ops.
Yeah, there's a lot of data analytics involved. Uh, I personally believe if you're ever having a problem in any business whatsoever, you got to be able to sit down and look at the data. Uh,
Mm,
so if people are struggling to make sales, we're going to sit down and look at that. If people are struggling getting their marketing optimized, we're going to look at that. If they have inefficient workflows, we're going to look at that. We're just essentially going to look at anything and everything that's going to relate to an issue in your business and see what we can do to rectify it.
mm. Now, talk to me about how you avoid getting too into the weeds. I see a lot of business owners that fundamentally they don't have a good product, but they'll be like amazing marketers, and then I'll see them posting on LinkedIn doing their thought leadership. That's like my favorite thing. They're doing their thought leadership about like this type of ad, this return on ad spend, this CPC. How deep do you get into this before you go, hey, there's some fundamental things that we need to cover with the business? Because I think I'm more of like a let's keep it really simple. Like, let's sell more. Let's make sure we know how to do that. What's the path to selling more? I'm sure that's an important part of how you coach people, but maybe talk to me about how you balance those two elements.
Yeah, so it depends on what issue we're addressing, right? Typically, I try to tell people, explain to me a problem as if I'm 8 years old, right?
Okay.
If they are unable to articulate what the actual issue is, one of two things is happening. Either they don't fully understand it, or there actually isn't an
Mm,
issue.
mm,
So I look for a lot of clarity before I take any steps further in trying to diagnose or assess anything. Because if we're not talking about the same thing and if we are not literally on the same page, there's no conversation to be had.
Interesting. Is that where your clients go, dude? Why are you asking all these questions, man? Just fix it.
Not particularly. It's very eye-opening for them, the questions that I ask, because they start to realize, wow, no one has ever asked me this, and I've never asked this for myself. And they kind of come to this realization of, as a business owner, these are the types of things I guess I should know to think about, but don't. Uh,
Mm,
but for the ones that can explain and very clearly articulate what an issue is that they're experiencing with their business, whether something is falling off with their marketing or something is damaged in their sales process, uh, that's usually great. Now let's open the books and look at the data.
interesting. Maybe talk to me about what some of these maybe simple questions are that people have an issue understanding. Depends on what the problems in the business are, but what are some of the typical like things that you're going to talk about to get the wheels turning for a business owner?
Yeah, so I really do take it to like the fundamental level. So forgive me if some of this stuff
No.
sounds so basic that uh, someone might come to me and say, "I'm struggling to hit 10,000 this month." So the first thing I'll ask is, "When was the last time you hit 10,000?"
Okay.
They'll be like, "I never did 10,000." Okay, cool. So it's just a target.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
It's
cool.
a nice round target though. 10,000, that sounds really good.
Yeah. And so from there, I might ask something along the lines of, "Cool. How many sales have you made?" And they'll be like, "Well, I'm new to selling." I'll be like, "Oh, okay." So there's definitely going to be some kind of issue in sales, but if they're shooting for a 10K a month target, as an example, and I've asked them how much they made, and they typically aren't even getting opportunities to make sales,
Mm,
now I'm going to start to just approach the conversation a different direction, which is just tell me about your lead flow. How many leads are you getting? And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not. I'm spending a ton of money on ads and it's not working." And I'll be like, okay, so this is not even a sales conversation anymore. Now it's a marketing conversation, right? So it
mm,
really is
mm,
basic questions that I'm asking at first. There are some companies that turn to me and say, "Hey, I'm doing 100K a month right now and I'm struggling to get above that." Like we're like balancing between like 85 to 100K, but like the 100K is the barrier. And I'll say, okay, cool. Show me your data. Show me your conversion rates. Show me where things are quote unquote going wrong. Um, and they might ask, what specific data are you looking for? And I'll say, how many opportunities are there for sales? How many calls are actually live, or how many demonstrations? Because for some people they do demos, some people they just do sales calls.
Mm.
uh, how many offers are being made, right? How many, and then like what's the actual close rate of the offers? Because if we find that maybe there are 10 people booking a call and only 3 are showing up and there's a 70% drop off,
Mm.
you've got an issue with your lead nurturing, right? You've got an issue with keeping people hot enough to get to the call. So great. Now we've identified an issue. We've identified a giant lever that if we could fix this, you'll have plenty of additional opportunities for no additional ad spend, for no additional anything. And you'll just have more opportunities to scale that way and break past 100 if you're currently doing 100 at your current conversion rates, right?
Mm.
Um, so it really is that simple, like you were saying earlier, tell me the issue and then I'll just ask a little bit of general questions around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds like, for a lot of businesses you talk to, they don't maybe they have the data because they know, like, I'm supposed to track these things, but they've never thought about more at a deeper level, what does this mean if we get 14 qualified leads per month and we close 4 of them? Like, what does that mean? How do I even do something with that after the fact?
Yeah. I think a lot of them also, in addition to not knowing what the metric is, for those that do know what the metric is, they've never done a historical analysis. I lost your audio.
Sorry about that. S Talk to me about the data. Maybe help me understand. Are people just not collecting the data, not understanding the data, or they have it and they're like it's like posting on social media. I know I'm supposed to do this, but I don't know why, you know?
So it's a little bit of they don't collect the data, and a little bit of that last one, which is I have the data, but I'm just doing it and I have no idea why whatsoever.
This
I
is a
think they
joke that I've told like 2 or 3 times this week. I think it was either, Ron White or Larry the Cable Guy. He's like, "Got a horse." He's like, "It broke his leg, so I had to shoot it." And he's like, "Now it has a gunshot wound and a broken leg. I don't know why I had to shoot it." But that's kind of it. Like, I'm collecting this data, like, I know I'm supposed to, but I don't know why. Like, I just have it, you know?
Yeah, that's funny. Um, yeah, and typically I think that there's a lot of I think people also misunderstand the concept of data.
Okay.
There's a preconceived notion of if I start tracking data, I'm going to have to start following a lot of really boring stuff. And many people don't like looking at spreadsheets. They don't like looking at metrics. They don't like looking at numbers. They simply, when they're in the entrepreneurial spirit or the business owner mentality, they want to know, do I have money? Do I not have money?
Mm.
And if you could shift your perspective away from data is boring and more towards data can tell you a story,
Mm.
then you can start operating your business in a way where it's almost like an adventure. It's like, cool, where do I want to take the story next? The data points are kind of like the bricks that you follow to make sure that the story comes to fruition.
I actually think it's really easy for an entrepreneur to, like, put their head down and grind, and it's just like, "I'm just, like, grinding, dude. I'm doing leads, I'm doing calls, like, I did 300, emails today." I actually think that's really easy technically. The hard part is those things that you're, like, less comfortable with, less familiar with. It's, like, on the fringe of what you know how to do, so you get uncomfortable, like, doing it. So a lot of people just, like, grind away, and that's kind of a proxy for productivity for them instead of slowing down and being like, "Well, actually, I know there's probably a better way to do this," as you pointed out, like, starting to understand the story that my data's telling me, but instead, I'm just like, "Grind mode, dude."
100%.
Yeah,
Complete agreement with you.
yeah. So what kind of businesses are you mostly working with?
Most of the businesses that I'm working with are coaching companies, online coaching companies, and they have a variety of different fields that they're in. One of them does life coaching for moms. Another one helps corporate professionals transition into an encore career. Another one is a world class fitness professional. He's actually trained a few NBA players. One I think was like a huge MVP. I'm not a sports guy, but I'm sure like if I dropped the athlete's name, if you're a sports guy, you probably know who he is.
Well, there's only a couple NBA MVPs, so
Andrew Wiggins.
yeah, Wiggy baby.
Yeah, so he
He
was
played
his.
for the Cavs for a little while.
Did he?
Yeah.
So one of my clients was his strength and conditioning coach.
Mm,
And but then I have like a local virtual golf facility that they're trying to scale and grow their business and use ads and things like that, which they haven't ever implemented before. And so I'm working with them on that as well. So if it requires being online, that's typically who my client is.
interesting. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. You didn't start as a coach. You had to actually get some experience, right? So take me back to the start. Where does this all begin and how do you go eventually, okay, I'm actually knowledgeable enough about this field to coach other people in business?
I don't think anyone's asked me that question in that specific way. So if I take you back to the start, we're probably looking at my early high school days when I think my guidance counselor asked, "Are there any electives that you want to try?" And I said photography. And when you're in high school, there are certain people that you either know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life. I have a couple of friends like that. One of them always said, "I'm going to be an architect." He's an architect in Manhattan, and like he does well. Another one always said, "I'm going to be a doctor," and he's a doctor and he's doing well. And then there's the other side where it's like, I have no freaking idea, right? Like,
Me,
you
yeah.
want to do?
Yeah. I didn't know. I wanted to be a professional soccer player.
Yeah,
Turned out there was a lot of kids that wanted to be a pro soccer player, and they ended up being better than me. So,
that's funny.
yeah.
I'm sure they're not that much better than you. They're probably world class. I actually have a colleague who I think is from Ohio as well. Are you from Ohio or you just
Yeah.
reside in
Yep.
Ohio?
Columbus area, born and raised.
Yeah, and when he was growing up, I think his family was very big into soccer too. I guess is that a very Ohio thing, soccer?
It's a pretty popular sport in Ohio, I would say.
Gotcha. Um, so for me, I kind of was just like, I want to try this photography thing. I'd love to be able to show people the way that I see the world. Um, and as I was getting really deep into that, and I was getting really good at photography, a teacher in high school that I was very close with had said to me, "Hey, photography is cool, but you should go into business and then learn how to actually craft a business around what you want to do, which is photography."
That's a pretty wise teacher right there.
Yeah,
Some people might not like that advice though, actually.
yeah, I definitely didn't. I was like, "What? No, I hate everything that has to do with formal education. I'm a creative type."
Yeah. You're
Um,
gonna be the next big photographer. Shows how much
yeah,
I know about photography. I can't name like one famous photographer.
Me neither. In fact, shortly after that conversation, my photography teacher and I got into a huge fight.
Mm,
And to the point where I said, "F this. I never want to touch a camera for the rest of my life." And I actually didn't touch a camera after AP, my AP photo course and that disagreement and everything was submitted. I sold my camera and I never took a picture on my own for I think another 14 years.
whoa, interesting.
Yeah, it was a traumatic thing.
Do you regret that at all? Do you like thinking back about that? Do you wish that maybe you had a little, not to say maturity, but you go, "Hey, look, this does not define my relationship with photography."
I don't think I regret not following through on photography, but I do regret allowing that experience to have as much weight on me as it did.
Mhm.
But
Mm.
when you're a kid, I mean, when you're a teenager, especially a very opinionated teenager, I might
Oh,
add.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I knew everything when I was a teenager, dude.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was what it was. And then I went to school and I did my freshman year in a business major. And I was just like, this isn't for me. I hate this. I didn't even want to go to college. Like
Mm,
I was just like, this isn't for me. And through all of this, I was also a musician.
'kay.
So photography is what I want to do professionally, but I was writing songs since I was 11. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm self-taught on the guitar for the most
Interesting.
part. There was like a year that I took lessons, but I didn't really do much. Um, Self-taught on the guitar, which transitions to the bass as well. And then I picked up drums and I picked up piano. And so like I I got all of this and then I went and I did my freshman year and then I came home because why was I spending so much money on a school that I wasn't enjoying the education?
Mhm.
And I went to community college and got a job as a music teacher for a local studio around here.
Interesting.
And
It's a very creative path.
yeah, I realized that one, creativity has to be a very I thrive in creativity. I
'Kay.
thrive in it. Um, and after about a year and a half of teaching music, and I was working with people of all ages. There were kids that I was working with at 8 years old, and then there were adults at like 65 that were coming to the studio. And I realized this is really cool and also not it's not lining up with like my creative vision. I had no idea what my creative vision was. I just knew that like full-time teaching music while I was still a student at community college, this wasn't the way. And as I was like flipping through, I don't remember if I was like flipping through like a catalog or something at the college, or if I was just talking to one of the staff there. Someone threw out at me, "Hey, did you know that this college has a studio recording technology program?" And
Hmm.
I was like, now that sounds cool. Like, I would love to be a producer, or I'd love to just be like in the studio mixing, engineering. And I followed through with that. Um, I got my certificate from there in studio recording technology. I got an internship at Columbia University. I did live music there for like 7 or 8 months. I got an internship at a recording studio here in New York where like I was mixing and like actually doing all the recording for some local musicians that were coming in. It was a lot of fun. It was
Mm.
a lot of fun. And then I wanted to do it on my own because somebody's got to pay the bills, right?
Mhm.
So I did that a little bit. And there was one rapper specifically that he and I actually met in our recording class together. And he and I worked together for a while, and I was mixing a lot of his stuff, and I think he's gaining a lot more popularity now. It didn't really gain as much traction as we would have liked, but um, it was a cool experience doing it under my own roof. You know, like this is my studio setup because I had everything. Like I still have my original mixing board right here next to me. I've upgraded my microphone, my interface, things like that. You know, computer obviously, but it's still like very much like part of my soul. And like to be able to do it under my roof was just amazing.
Mhm.
Having musicians come by and just recording stuff and having a good time. Well, learned really, really quickly that thanks to the internet, there isn't really much need to pay a lot of to pay engineers a lot.
Mm.
Um, so I just said to myself, okay, cool. Like I gotta make more money somehow. Still be creative, but make more money somehow. And that led to I should probably go back to college. But if I was
Mm.
going back to college, because at this point, like I'd finished up at community college and I was like taking time off, and I got a job working at a nonprofit startup for a little bit, and I was managing the office, and I was kind of like assisting the CEO like to grow the company. And I was thinking to myself, if I go back to school, I got to do it my way. I just have
Mm.
to do it my way. There's no way I'm doing one of these cookie cutter programs that like people go through and then I end up spending tons of money for a degree that's going to be useless.
Mm.
So I found a program here in the CUNY system, which is the City Universities of New York, where I got to design my own major.
Mm.
And I put together an entire proposal for this major that was what did I name it? I don't remember what I named it, but the premise was I was going to be the person that builds recording studios.
Interesting.
And that proposal got accepted. And then, due to some bureaucratic issues, I couldn't actually follow through with it. So I had to change my major that I didn't even get started on.
Mm.
I always knew that there was a lot of money in law. So I
Mm.
pivoted and I created a new major called music media in the law.
Mm.
And it got accepted and I followed through with it. And that's my bachelor's degree, is a major that I designed called music media and the law, which was essentially how public policy influences the media and music industries.
Mm. You remind me of myself in some capacity in that I don't wanna do things the way that everyone else does them. That's, like, very annoying to me.
Mm.
I remember, like, when I was a kid, if we had to do some project, like, do a project on some famous figure, and it was like, someone's doing Martin Luther King Jr., I'd be like, "I'm not doing that." Like, I don't wanna do the same thing as Dave. Like, someone's doing Abraham Lincoln, can't do Abraham Lincoln now, he's out. Like, I wanted to do my own thing, and that reminds me a lot of myself where you go like, I don't wanna do things the way that everyone else does them, which sometimes can lead you into trouble, right? But on the other hand, it can lead you to a place of a unique skill set, which is kind of where it sounds like you have, found yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. The most useless piece of paper I still own today, because I don't do anything with music, media, or law professionally these days.
Yeah, the college experience was an interesting one for me also. So I started a business while I was in college. I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I knew was I was like, I'm gonna play soccer. Like I'm gonna play soccer in college, and my colleges were picked exclusively based on the colleges that wanted me to be on their team,
Mm.
not based on their academic prowess at all whatsoever. I will be quick to admit that. Um, and I didn't even know what I wanted to study, so it wasn't like, "Oh, this school is a good team and they have my program." I was just like, I don't know, figure it out from there. It is a little bit of luck, maybe serendipity, that the college I ended up going to had a whole entrepreneurial center,
Mm.
the Burton D. Morgan Entrepreneurship Center. And also by kind of a stroke of luck, I was supposed to be in like a I think it was like a calculus class, but it was 5 days a week for an hour, which is significantly longer than all the other classes. Because
Yeah.
usually you'll have like a 45-minute class 3 days a week or like a 3-hour class 1 time a week, whereas this was like 5 hours a week, and it was at like I wanna say it was 8 AM, but I think it was 9 AM. Now me being older, I'm like, "Well, that was early," right? So I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing this. I'm gonna drop that physics class." And somehow they were like, "Well, maybe somewhere I did some sort of a survey and things that I was interested in." I said business or entrepreneurship somewhere, and they put me into an entrepreneurship 101 class. So that was one of the first classes that I entered while I went to school. And my professor, who's still a good friend, kind of was my advisor eventually. He passed out this sheet that talked about all the reasons to start a business while you were in college. Sort of counterintuitive because you're like, well, I'm a college student. Like, I don't really have money. I don't have any knowledge. Like, where are the consumers? And it sort of turned that on its head. And it said, well, you don't have any money. So you have nothing to lose. Like, you can't go bankrupt. If you have $500 in your bank account, like, that's the most money that you could possibly lose. You have a captive market of other college students. You have all these advisors around you who are willing to help you. They're willing to like donate their time, like lawyers, marketing professionals, accountants, all of these people. And if you do end up failing, like you're 19 years old, you're 20 years old, like you're not going to be booted out onto the street. You're going to
Now's
have
the time to fail.
plenty of runway to go figure it out. And that, like, it was a handout. This is how old school I was. It was a piece of paper they handed out. Now they would never. But it just went in one ear and out the other for everyone else. But I was like, this makes so much sense. I'm going to start a business. So my sophomore year, I started a business at college. So most of my education was from doing that business, not necessarily the classes. And that's one of my big pet peeves about college is they make everything about theory. Like, once you graduate, Alex, you can do this. And it's like, well, why are we doing theory? Let's just do it. And that would be what I would do if I was an entrepreneurship professor. First thing I'd be like, okay, everyone, you have $20. Like the goal this semester is turn that $20 into the most money that you possibly can. Person who turns it into the most money gets an A plus. Person down the way. but that's maybe not how colleges feel as if they have to teach the youth.
No, I'm in complete agreement with you. In fact, I remember I've always been, so even since high school, that of the mentality that unless you're in a very technical profession, medicine, law, which even that's debatable, like things like that, you probably don't need to go to college. Which is funny because I worked in higher education, so we can talk about that in a bit. But
Mhm.
I've one of the things I told my wife, even before we got married, was when we have kids eventually, I'm not forcing them to go to college. She's like, well, what are they going to do? I was like, if they want to start a business, I'm going to fully support them on doing that because
Mhm.
I remember I don't remember where I was. I think I told a professor one day, one day soon, all of these ginormous corporate companies are not going to require a college degree to work for them. And then I remember like a year or two later, Penguin Publishing and Google both removed the 4-year bachelor degree from like their requirements of certain jobs. And I was like, it's happening. It's happening. Like the higher education system is falling, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think the higher education system, not to say that it's let's throw everything out, right? As you stated, there are some fields. I think that even doctors and lawyers tell you, like, once I do the theory, that's cool, but once I get into the operating room, like, everything's out the window, and it's like, "Oh gosh," like, we're actually, like, making cuts, or you're in the courtroom and your witness starts bawling her eyes out, and you're like, "Okay, like, I didn't learn how to deal with this in law." Um, but I think at some capacity, the college structure produces people who are just very linearly thinkers, like very straight line thinkers. Like, I graduate high school, I go to college, I do well at college, I go and I send off my resume, I get responses from the resume, I go to the interview, I try to prepare well for the interview. You're like, that's great, and we do need some people like that in every business. But there are a lot of businesses where it's like, hey, I need someone who thinks a little different, right? Because like you're talking about clients who their business is not working. If you just bring in like a kid who thinks straight line, they don't think different. They're not going to be able to go, well, hey, I know you're doing it this way, but let's re engineer this problem. Let's invert this and look at it from a different angle. Let's go into the data. Okay, well, I know we think that TikTok is our best marketing avenue, but is that even right? Like, should we start a podcast? Should we write a book? Just someone who thinks a little different might be what you need. And that might be the kid who is like hustling, like you, like starting his own studio, like trying things, failing, figuring it out as he goes. And then he can come in and be like, okay, I done all these things that didn't work. Here's what I think.
One of my mentors in one of the capacities that I worked with, when I thought I was going to go into law, I got an internship at one of the courts over here, and the I remember that the judge mentioned to me that when they try to hire people, whether it's a legal assistant or whatever, they look to see where their background in education is, where their law background came from. He said, typically, if they came from an Ivy League school, we won't interview them. We won't even give them the chance. And
Interesting.
yeah, he said, we want to see the kids that are, I guess, kids. It's a very millennial term that I use, because like I resonate with that. Um, but we want to see the people that went out of their way to literally prove themselves in every capacity to be same rank as the Ivy League kids.
Mm.
So they didn't even give Ivy League kids the chance. They were just like, show us the non Ivy League kids. They want it better. Like they want it more.
There's this famous story called the Turtle Traders. It
Mm.
was this Wall Street trader, very successful, one of the most successful traders, and him and his business partner were having this argument. One was saying, you cannot build a trader. Like, a trader just has something inside of them. It's something they're born with. It's like a know-how, a gut feeling, things like that. The other partner was like, no, I can teach anyone to become a trader. So they go back and forth with this argument. This is a true story. There's a book, and there probably should be a movie. There isn't yet. But they go back and forth on this idea for years, and then finally they're like, well, let's just do it. Let's try it. And he's like, all right, sure. So this guy goes out and he starts to build a team, and it's like the world's best job offer opportunity. I'll give you my own money to trade. He gave every single trader $1 million, and they kept a portion of their profits. I think it was a pretty high portion, like 25 or 33% of their profits. And they didn't have to cover their losses, but they could get booted out of the program if they lost enough money. Like if you lost like, half your chips, like he's gonna be like, hey, yeah, you can't keep trading with us, right? And he intentionally, when he went out, he would mostly avoid people who had any financial experience previously. So the people he ended up hiring were like considered degenerates by society. Like he was like getting like gamblers. He's like, these are the types of people I want. I want people who can like think in bets. He hired like a security guard. He hired like a janitor. He hired like a couple of women, which this was in the 80s. So that was like, there's no women who are like trading on Wall Street. He hired all these like off the wall people because he's like, I don't want people to come in with these preconceived notions about what trading is like. And then he would literally lock them in the room. And I think he only would give them like 3 pieces of information. They couldn't watch the news. They weren't allowed to watch the news. All they could do was like look at price. They could look at like price history and like maybe one other factor. And he's like, those are the only 3 things that I allow you to look at. And it's a famous story because these traders, not only were they successful, but some of the traders went on to become like the next generation of most successful traders in the world. And yeah, it was an interesting story and a fun one. There's a whole book about it called The Turtle Traders.
That story, first off, thank you for sharing. It reminds me of that line from Moneyball. Have you ever seen Moneyball?
I have.
It reminds me of that line that he says where he's like, and who says baseball isn't romantic, right? Like who says money and finances isn't romantic? Like
Yeah.
that's such a beautiful story.
Yeah, true story too. So it's out there. So okay, you're going through your collegiate experience. You get through it. You're like, great, I have this degree. Now what?
I do my internship. I do my internship in the Supreme Court over here, and I remember I remember the judge even specifically telling me, by the time you're done with this internship, I'm going to try to get you to drop the idea of law school.
Oh.
And I was like, game on, let's do it. Because like I'm not giving up without a fight. And so
Mm.
the internship finished. He and I are still connecting. I got a job at a law firm as a legal assistant. Um, I'm studying for the LSATs. And at the same time, I'm reading this famous money book called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Uh-oh, he's been bitten by it.
And I finished that book. And I think I was like 5 weeks into my 3-month LSAT course. I stopped
Mm.
going. I never went to the LSAT.
It's
I
funny
drew,
because someone else has almost told me this exact same story on
really?
this podcast. I don't know if they were doing law school, and I unfortunately can't even remember the guest, but they're like, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I just quit what I was doing.
That's exactly what it was. Like I turned to my boss and I was like, "Hey, I know that I told you I'm like really hell bent on law school and no more." And so I told her I was like, I loved my boss at the law firm. Like she and I are still very very close. She's an incredible mentor to me. And but I told her I was like, just so you know, like my direction has shifted now and I'm going to stay with you until I figure out what that new direction is. And she was like, thanks. And I think I was with her for like another 6 or 7 months. Uh, and then I went, funny enough, back into higher education. Um,
He just can't get enough. He just can't get enough.
this time on the other side, getting paid to be there.
All right.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, finished up at that law firm. At the same time, I was also doing property management a little bit, but then
Okay.
I went back into higher ed, and then I think like 3 years into higher ed, and realizing just like how it doesn't change on the other side of the table,
Mm,
um, how I needed to get out and just be on my own,
mm.
and that's what I did. I enrolled in my first like coaching program, one of these programs out there that's like, we're going to teach you how to make $1 zillion in 8 weeks. And
Yep.
I went into that, and spoiler alert, did not make $1 zillion in 8 weeks.
Mm,
If anyone tells you it's going to be 8 weeks from you to go from a brand new concept or zero idea to multi 6-figure months with zero experience in building that business prior, turn the other way. They're just trying to sell you something.
It's
Uh,
you asked before we started what's on the wall behind me. It's actually a series of tweets by an entrepreneur that I really love, Naval Ravikant,
mm,
and one of which is, "There are no get rich quick schemes. Those are just people getting rich off of you." So,
mm,
there you go.
100%.
Yeah.
So I joined that. I spent way more money than I should have on that program. A buddy of mine had gone through it, and so I was like, they must be worth it because like his business has blown up. Granted,
Mm,
his it was a family business that he was running the marketing for. So like this company essentially taught him how to do really solid marketing, and then his company exploded. Um,
but he had a company previous, right,
but he had a company.
right.
Um, and I'd actually asked about that too initially. I was like, "Does this work for brand new ideas?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." Like, why not?
It works for everybody.
Yeah. Um, so that was like my entrance into the online space. While it's really, really easy to hold resentment to something like that, I'm so grateful that it taught me the language of online business. It taught me what funnels were, it taught me how to run ads, the psychology and ideas behind what's considered high ticket sales, sales for stuff like multi-thousand-dollar products in one conversation. Uh, so I went through that, and then I started developing like my own offer. I was going to help overweight men with self-esteem issues.
Okay.
You can't tell by looking at me now, which is very fortunate, but I used to be almost 100 pounds heavier. Yeah. At my peak, I was 260. I weigh in 185 now. Um,
Mm,
and I like had this idea because I do legitimately believe that it doesn't matter what weight you are, all you need in this life is self confidence. If
mm,
you have self confidence, everything gravitates towards you,
mm,
and that not like an arrogant self confidence, just like I'm good with myself, like. And as I was trying to get that rolling, I was also in a conversation with some investors because I had this patent idea for a wristwatch.
'kay.
I'm a watch guy, and I had put together these sketches and this concept, and I hadn't seen anyone do it yet. And I was having conversation with these investors, and then someone that I met in that program that I went through had turned to me for some advice, and I ended up just naturally coaching her regularly
Mm,
on her business and on her life, like how I've seen things, how I've come to understand things, and I helped her so much for months, just as a friend, that at a certain point she turned to me and said, "How much is it going to take for you to come into my business to help me run it and to actually coach my clients?" Um,
mm,
so I started working with her. I was life coaching healthcare professionals during COVID. So from August of or April of 2020 to August of 2021, I was life coaching healthcare professionals throughout the
mm.
pandemic.
With their business or more so like their mindset?
No, their mind, their heart, their spirit, everything was, the pandemic happened and like the world was falling apart spiritually, mentally, just and healthcare professionals were the ones that really took the beating. Uh, so it was a very first, it was a very I'm very humbled and I was honored that I was able to serve them when I did to hold a space for them and to help them heal through what they were going through. And I was very humbled in the process. Like it, anyone and everyone in the world has some kind of issue. But to be a healthcare professional during a pandemic that's literally destroying like like big percentages of the world,
Mhm.
whether it's the actual human life or manufacturing or industries or the economy, like uh, it was like no one, in my opinion, got it harder than healthcare workers. Uh,
Mm.
and so I worked with them for a bit, and then I went out on my own for a bit, and I was doing a little bit of independent consulting. Now that I had experience actually managing and operating an online business, and then I got hired full time as the head of operations for a fairly large and successful men's life coaching company.
Yeah, definitely have some questions about that.
Yeah, and I was with them for a couple of years, and thought to myself, "Cool, it's I feel like I know enough now to really be able to just go out on my own and kill it and crush it." And that was this past January. And that's exactly what I've been doing, patting myself on the back. Like, I've got my clients. There's no course that I sell or anything. Like, my clients come to me, they retain me. I'm with them. I act as a fractional COO. I'm running their business. I'm running their ads. I'm doing their sales call reviews. Like, I'm just on top of everything. And it has just been one of the biggest blessings ever. And like, some of my clients who had never made sales are making sales consistently and are past the 10K a month mark now, like we had talked
Mm.
about at the beginning of the conversation. Others, like, are nearing that 100K mark, and like they're trying to get past it, and that's where I'm working with them now too. So it's cool. It's been an experience over my professional career.
Yeah, you're and I, our path to entrepreneurship was very different. I was just too stupid when I was young to realize like, hey, you don't have the experience to do this. And it sounds like you like kept getting all these hints along the way, like you're probably smart enough to do this, you're probably capable of doing this, but you're like, oh, I'm not ready, you know?
Oh, I definitely tried. And then, what's that like? It was Gretzky and Michael Scott that said you miss 100% of the
Miss
shots
all the
you don't
shots
take.
you don't take. Well, my favorite quote when it comes to entrepreneurship is that individual entrepreneurial efforts often fail, but over the course of a career, independent entrepreneurs rarely fail.
Hmm.
Meaning, like, if like you're like, oh, I'm going to start a studio, and you're like, okay, well, that didn't really work, and then you bounce around, and you're like, okay, I'll do coaching, okay, I'll do like maybe selling my own course or this, that, and the third thing. Eventually, you kind of just keep on moving along the path, and as long as you don't tap out, you'll eventually get good enough at it to understand how the game is played. And, unlike athletics where, hey, you have a shelf on this thing, man. Like by the time you hit like 32, 33, 35, like you're pretty much out of this ball game. Entrepreneurship is not like that. You can do this for the next 50 years if you have the speed and steam and energy. And as long as you listen to Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, you don't totally go broke, then you're always there with a lifeline and able to keep this thing going. So I think that's one of the exciting things about entrepreneurship. You go like, "Oh, I could never." It's like, "What do you mean you could never?" Like it's not that hard to learn. There's some pretty straightforward concepts if you learn them and you apply them. I always tell people find a profitable, replicable transaction. If you can do that, that's all you need. Then you're in business. So,
100%.
maybe talk to me about some of these coaching programs that you deal with. Sounds like you had a bad experience with coaching. Tell me why do you think that like these coaching and these leadership training courses get a bad rap, and how do people vet these for like this is going to help me, this is not necessarily the right thing for me?
I don't remember if it was when we started recording this podcast or if it was just a little bit before, but like, some people are really good marketers.
Mhm.
Some people are just good with their words.
Yeah.
And it's difficult online with zero relationship to someone previously to be able to sift through what is and what isn't garbage.
I have a person that I have personally, like, done some business with, who's a fantastic marketer, but I know the actual, like, reality of their business, and then we've worked with some clients that they've worked with, and I'm like, actually legitimately feel bad for people that start working with them because 'cause I'm like, "This is all bullshit." Like, you don't have a profitable business. Like, the only reason you're still in business is because you keep taking more money from investors, like, over and over and over again. And look, maybe I'm the asshole, and 5 years from now, he will sell this company for $20 million. But I'm like, "Dude, I feel bad for the people who are willing to pay you, like, 5 grand a month." And to me, like, I feel like I've built a pretty successful business. We've been in business for 10 years now. We just crossed 120 million in total sales lifetime through the
Congratulations.
company. Appreciate that. 31 employees. We're building a 65,000 square foot facility. Like I feel like we've done some stuff. I would feel real slimy about taking 5 grand from somebody because I'm like, look, you can learn all this like in a 30-minute YouTube video, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, to exactly your point, right? There's people are great marketers and are really crappy at fulfillment.
Yeah.
So, about 6 or 7 years ago, must have been like 2017, 2018, around then, the coaching scene was just starting to take off online. Whether it was life coaching or business coaching, like that was kind of when like the engines for the rocket were like starting to rumble and you could feel it. So there weren't a lot of people in the game. There were only a handful of people that were teaching what to do successfully in the game. But then as marketing became more and more available to the planet, whether it was paid marketing through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, um, or organic and how algorithms change, reaching an audience of any kind became such a low barrier to entry that anyone and everyone decided I'm going to be a coach regardless of whether or not they had experience with it.
Mhm.
And where things fell apart for the industry as a whole was everyone essentially learned marketing and sales from essentially these three different sources like that are at the top of it all. So everyone's marketing and selling the exact same way, which makes it really, really difficult for consumers or other businesses. But in this case, I'll call them consumers also if they intend on purchasing something. Uh, it's really, really difficult for consumers to be able to sit down and say, like, what makes you different than that one?
Mhm.
Uh,
And what I've found is that sometimes, not always, but the people who are actually legitimately towards the top of a field, they don't feel the need to tell you how good they are at it. Like, again, not saying I'm the top of the field, but I would never be like, "We're so good at this. We're amazing at this. You have to listen to our strategy." I'm like, I know my limitations of what I know. I know there are people who know more than me. There's people who are light years ahead of me and where we are. So I would never get on my soapbox and start that process. Whereas I think sometimes people who are multiple layers and rungs below you don't have that same like fear and or need to necessarily be legitimate. Um, so they're willing to stand up and talk that talk.
Yeah, there's definitely the argument to be made from a psychological perspective. If someone's never heard of you before, like, let me flex, right? Let me tell you about all the amazing things that I've done. But when I get onto calls with people, which my selling process is completely different than what people in the coaching industry teach now. Um, when someone asks me like, okay, how did like working together, what's it like? I have to hire you for like 90 days or 6 months or something like that. And I tell every single person the exact same way. Tell them we're on a 30-day basis because there's a very good chance that I'm really shitty at what I do. And if that's the case, I'm not going to hold you to working with me.
Mhm,
Um, one of my clients has been on my roster for almost a year. All the rest of my clients have been on my roster for since January or December, even probably, right? So like 5 going on 6 months almost. So yeah, you just got to be on. I mean, if you are, let me say it this way. I keep stopping myself when I have a new thought. If you market to someone really, really well and fail on your delivery, cool, you made a sale.
mhm,
If you market to someone really, really well and fulfill really, really well, you have a recurring client,
mhm.
right? Like, it doesn't matter whatever your front end product is. The real profit is in the retention coming
Right.
from a business standpoint, right? Like, will they keep coming back to you? And if they don't, you should take that as a really big data point, right? Like, because you can you can grow your business so much on past customers alone.
Mhm,
Uh, Not to say like sell them something, but like if you just do a really good job, they'll naturally come back to you,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, I would say that's an important piece of advice when you have a business is ensure at some capacity that you can get this customer to be retained. We used to be in the construction industry, and you would one and done. Like, there's no repeat for the customer. It's like, you need one roof, the roof's done. You don't need us again for 25 years. And it was just insanely difficult to continue to like grind out those sales. And every single time it's fresh, it's new. They don't trust you. They're expecting this to go poorly. And by the time you build their trust and you deliver, it's like, okay, well, sorry, Mr. Jenkins, like, we're never gonna talk again unless there's an issue. So, I would say if anybody's getting into business, like, ensure that whatever you do doesn't have to be like insurance where I'm gonna have this client for the next 30 years, but if you wanna make life easy on yourself, make sure that you can keep your clients for some period of time, and or that client somehow will help you get the next client.
Yeah. Even think about it from a referral standpoint, right? Like, give your client a really solid experience, and even if they don't sign up with you, they're gonna go brag about you to 2 or 3 of their friends that are in the same position that need your help, and then you'll just grow exponentially, that way. Which that's happened to me as well. What 2 of my clients, I started with one of them, and I was just doing a really great job for her. And her husband, who is growing an online business, saw the work that I was doing, and she kept telling him, like, "Hey, you need to go work with Ofir." And so he came on as a client too. And then they
Mm.
both work on ventures together. And then they're like, "Hey, could you do this as a third account?" Right? So, like, uh,
Mm.
there's so like just everybody just do a good job. Just do a
Mm.
good job. Do the best that you can and be honest about it.
Then how would you tell people to spot potential coaches who are not capable of delivering at a high level, or maybe they don't have the experience that they're letting on? The flex goes a little farther than their actual muscles will allow.
So, this is actually like, ooh, I love this question because we're about to touch on something that no one in the coaching industry talks about. Um, I'm going to talk about how a coaching sales call is structured.
Okay.
Consumers potentially listening to this are going to be like, yay. Other coaches are going to be like, this guy's an asshole.
Don't give away the secrets.
That's what I do. Do you not want me to? I don't have
No,
to.
no, I'm not a coach. Don't worry, man. You're not gonna
Yeah.
offend me.
So coaching sales calls are structured in a way where the first half of the conversation is meant to ask you so many questions to understand exactly what you're going through, to demonstrate that they are the authority and they understand what you're going through because they're asking the right questions, and also to get the customer to feel a specific way about their issue enough that if that person were to then say, and here's the solution to your problem, um, work with me, the client in theory would be like, cool, let's work together.
Yep.
Now, that's not a bad structure. The intentionality behind it is bad if you have someone that isn't able to deliver, but that's where things go wrong, right? Like
Mm.
the coaches that can deliver versus the coaches that can't deliver are using the same structure for their calls. So the process that I use instead is zero selling. And I'm not sure if we'll talk about this a little bit later or not. This new project that I'm working on, but um, to me, a sale will come down to 2 things: build a relationship with someone and demonstrate your expertise. Just demonstrate your expertise with zero intention of making a sale. So the way my process works right now, I'm lifting under the hood, letting you guys know exactly what I do. I'll be like on Facebook, and someone in my friends list or whatever will be like, "Hey, I'm experiencing an issue with this automation. I don't know why people are clicking on the link. This email goes out, and then they're clicking on the link in the email, and it's supposed to trigger this, and I can't figure out what's going wrong." And I'll comment on it and be like, "Hey, did you check these settings? This, and this. By the way, I'm also going to drop you an audio of what I've experienced around stuff like this previously, what I've done previously to rectify it, and if I were you in this current position, what I would do moving forward." And I would drop them like I think some people I drop like a 2-minute audio, some people I drop a 15-minute audio, depending
Mm.
what it is. And I just leave that with them. And they'll typically come back to me and say, "Hey, we need to hop on a call." And I'll be like, "Great." And then we'll get on the call and I'll be like, "Share your screen." Because it's typically video calls, is what I do. I'll be like, "Share your screen. Open up your CRM. Let me take a look at this. Oh, here's where the logic is going incorrectly. Switch the setting, whatever." And their automations will be fixed. And I'll do
Mm.
that for free. I do that all up front because then one of 2 things will happen. Thanks very much. I'm going to refer you to every single person I know. Or thanks very much. Tell me how I can keep you on my roster. And I never have to. I haven't sold anyone anything for the entirety of my business. People ask to work with me instead.
Well, another thing that is a benefit of that is that they feel like they willingly made the decision to work with you. You weren't like pressuring them. And now they're like, I'm still hesitant. I really don't know if this fear guy's going to be able to deliver what he's saying. I just signed because I thought like it was the right thing to do. People get very hesitant to say no, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's definitely a human quirk. Like you don't want to like be offensive. Like someone walks into my office and like I'm like, "Oh gosh, like I'm gonna have a 5-minute conversation with this person that I know I do not need. I do not need a staffing agency." But you don't want to feel like a dick and be like, "We don't use staffing agencies, so please leave," you know?
Hmm.
So those people that they kind of encouraged themselves to sign on with you as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, and so to answer your question of like, what should someone ask on a coaching call is like, I would ask, could you demonstrate? Here's the situation that I'm in. Help me out. Like, what's going on? Show me. I mean, like, if you can help me out on the front end for free, and like, this is my personal opinion, and this is, I think, is the opinion that's starting to grow among some entrepreneurs in the online space. But like, I believe all information should be free. All information should be free. It's just that's how it should be. No one should ever feel disarmed in their business because they don't have information. And
Mhm.
where things just happen naturally is I get hired for application and implementation,
Mhm.
right? So like just ask the like if you're on a coaching call, if someone is trying to sell you into a coaching product, just ask them like, you demonstrate like this is my scenario. What would you do? How would you help me out? Things like that. Because if you're not satisfied with the answers that they give you don't have to make a decision.
You want very sort of specific answers, not like,
Yeah.
"Well, so that's, like, part of our process. What we'll do is we'll take you through a questionnaire," and you're like, "No, no, 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 just, like, cut to the chase a little bit."
Yeah. I had the same mentality when I was doing job interviews. I don't remember where I read it. I need to start keeping tabs of my sources so that people don't think I'm just making stuff up because I promise I'm not. But someone had said to me, an interview is not one way. An interview is a conversation.
Yep.
So when you're going into someone's office and you're interviewing for a job, it's not just them asking you questions. You better be asking them questions because the last thing you want to do is put your fate in someone else's hands that you could have avoided way ahead of time if you didn't need to be there.
Mm. You'd be shocked at how many people come in to interview for us and are just, like, so quiet. I'm like, "Come on." Like,
It's what they've been trained in school, right? Like back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like they're not encouraged to ask questions. They're encouraged to listen and yeah.
and if your interviewer is doing a lot of talking, that's usually a bad sign.
Mm.
Like, and this is a skill that I really have to work on is just asking a question, and if they stop and or like their answer is done, just like let the silence linger a little bit. Like, okay, not being like, yeah. So then what we would do here is, da, 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 da," and then before you know it, you've talked for 5 minutes, they've talked for 30 seconds, and you're like pitching your organization, and you're like, why am I pitching my organization? They walked into our office to try to get a job. That's a difficult one. And yeah, I would say if you're going into a job interview, just be prepared to talk like at length. Be prepared to talk about yourself. We hire warehouse associates, so it's a bit different at times. But some people will, I'll be like, so tell me about yourself. They'll be like, yeah, like I don't know. I'm just pretty normal, just like to work, get my work done, like to play video games. And it's like, you've told me nothing about yourself. Like, do you have a dog? What are your parents like? Where did you grow up? Like, help me out. Make this a lighter lift on my side.
Well, they did tell you something by not telling you anything, which is
That's
essentially
true.
they're hesitating to tell you
That
stuff.
is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know, sometimes people are just nervous, I guess, in interviews, or as you stated, they feel like I can't really open up in this situation, but I'd rather the interviewee won't shut up and just tell me everything about yourself. Sometimes people will tell us too much, like, yeah, and then I got arrested for this, and I'm like, why did you say that? But, I would rather have them speak and let me understand who they are and what their goals and aspirations are.
Mm.
So,
Amen.
why do you think that selling gets a bad rap? If you Very few kids in college are like, "I wanna go into sales." It's like, "Ugh, I don't wanna do that." A lot of people instantly go like, "I don't like sales," or "I don't wanna go into sales. It's not for me." And I'm like, "Have you ever done a sales job?" "No, but I know it's not for me." It's like, how do you know that? Why do you think that it gets a bad rap amongst, not only people who are thinking about, future careers or people who are being sold to?
I was one of those people where I was like, I don't want to be in sales. I friggin' love sales now. Like, it's sales is probably one of the funnest things you could do in your lifetime. Uh, I think it gets a really bad rap because there is naturally an awkwardness on this planet of taking money from someone uh, in a conversation. It's
Mm,
like, oh, like I have to like push this person to, get money from them, and I don't know if they're going to want to, and then I might feel rejected, and then like it's just easier to not sell them, and then like if they're just interested on their own, then maybe that's cool. But then then you swing the pendulum in the other direction. You have the stereotype car salesman, right? And who's like, oh, what? Yeah, like buy this car. It'll come with a spare kidney should you ever need one. Like that's cool. Um, I remember I went to a car dealership once, and on the sticker for the car, it said that the car came with a spoiler. There was no spoiler on the car. And I said to the sales guy, "Hey, where's the spoiler?" And he just went to the lip of the trunk that happens to like extend by like a centimeter, and he
mhm.
was like, "This is the spoiler." And I was like, "Get out of my face. You just lost the sale."
Yeah.
Uh, um,
If you're willing to say anything essentially to get that sale.
Yeah, and I think people also hold a lot of hesitation to identify with the people that made sales feel bad, right?
Mm,
Like, because if you think, "Hey, salesperson," there's really only a handful of salespeople that are like stereotype salespeople, and they're usually car salesmen, sometimes solar salespeople, and telemarketers,
yep,
and they're just trying to get your credit card, and they don't. Most of them don't actually care about you.
yeah. Yeah, it's just kinda like that phrase, "Not all men," not all salespeople are bad salespeople.
Exactly.
The best way that I heard it explained is that sales is teaching, and that kinda sounds like what the way that you sell is like, "I'm gonna teach. I'm not forcing a product upon you. I am teaching you about what I do and how I do it and the methodology and what I intend to accomplish with all these things and where I think that you can get to." You're gonna teach those person that thing and then allow them to make a decision on their own from there.
Yeah. The mentality that I take with it is, or the way that I visualize it, like I said earlier, I'm a watch guy. And there's a reason why Rolex and Patek and AP not only do all of their things sell off the shelves like hotcakes when there's something new, but they have wait lists that are like 3 to 5 plus years to be able to get a new piece.
Mm,
And I remember thinking to myself, like, what makes something what makes a product or a service have that type of experience, that it's so in demand, that it is so difficult to get a hold of? And I just asked myself, like, okay, the first time I held a Rolex and I was a watch guy, like, what was my experience? Wow, this is really well crafted. The attention to detail is great. It feels nice, right? And it just came down to like the experience that I had of this watch was like, I get it. I get how
mm,
people will drop 10, 20, $50,000 on a watch and not bat an eye and just know this is good. So I said to myself, how do I just make my sales process like that?
interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I show up, I solve their issues, I just give them all the information, and then if they wanna hold on to me the same way someone wants to hold on to a really, really nice watch, there's an option to do that.
Is that kinda how you think about, your process of, to sell without selling?
That's exactly it. So the things that like I've mentioned so far, like needing a relationship and a demonstration and that mentality, like this is all stuff that I cover in a training that I have on that website.
Interesting. So you've worked with a lot of business owners, some of which are having success, some of which are not. Maybe help me understand the differences between businesses that are working and businesses that aren't maybe working in your experience.
The biggest difference I could probably say, like the biggest needle mover is whether or not you can prove what you do.
Interesting.
At the end of the day, I think you and might be of the same mindset that a business doesn't have to be $1 trillion a year, but it has to be profitable. Your business has to be making money. And if there's one metric to follow, you're following revenue. So it's simply just, do you have something that's making you revenue? And if there are people that are still figuring it out, they're pretty much struggling with sales a little bit more or revenue a little bit more because they're still figuring it out. For the businesses that have already figured it out, now it's just a process of streamlining the systems
Mm,
and just scaling it up and growing it out. Um, yeah, so that's really it. Is like, are you figuring it out or not, or have you figured it out?
mm. Do you know about the midwit meme? Does this mean anything to you? So the
No.
midwit meme is sort of this like bell curve where on one side there's the person who's like a dullard, and then on the other side, far right, there's like the sage. I probably, if I have it on my desktop, I'll share it. I hope I do. Um, and then in the middle, there's the guy who's like the really smart person. Sure enough, I have it. I'll present my screen. Uh, and for those of you just listening, again, the midwit meme. It's the really smart guy is on the right hand side, kind of at the bottom of the bell curve, and then the really dull guy is on the left hand side. Can you see my screen, brother?
Yeah.
And then the guy in the middle is the smart one. You know, he went to Yale, he went to Princeton, and he's like, "No, you have to optimize cash flow. You have to have a high reoccurring customer base, a profitable ROAS. You have to make sure that all your ads are working." And then both the dumb guy and the sage on the right hand side, they're both like, "Just got to sell more." Um, that's honestly like how I think about it. Is so often I'm like, "Look, if you can't sell more, it might be because your product's not good." Like
Wait, say that again, because
your
I don't think enough people think about that.
people are totally delusional about their product. And I know this because I get on a ton of calls with like CPG, consumer product goods, or consumer packaged goods. People will tell me this is the best product in the industry. There's nothing like this. And I'm like, I've done business with 30 clients who have the exact same product, and it is better. It's legitimately better. Now it's more expensive, but it's a better product. So don't lie to me and tell me that it is the best product. Like my favorite is when I talk to people in the sports nutrition industry. They're like, "No, dude, this is the best pre-workout on the market." I'm like, "No, it's not." Like I know it's not. Like I can look at your ingredients and you have everything that everyone else has. Like Cellucor, the biggest company in the industry, makes this product and they don't even make like high-end products really. I'm like, "So don't lie to me." And really, you know, the first principle is not to fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. Don't fool yourself. Like, admit where your strengths are with your product, admit where your weaknesses are, because on Amazon, they're going to become super apparent. Like, and a lot of our clients are like, the customers just don't understand. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
the customers do understand because they paid you for your product. So they understand what they got, they understand the experience that they were hoping for, and then they understand the experience that you delivered upon. And sure, there's going to be the offhand customer that's like just, you know, whatever, stupid. Like they buy like a keto product and they're like, it's just not sweet at all. And you're like, okay, well, it doesn't have any carbs or sugar in it. Like, read the label, buddy. But often people will be like, I just don't understand why people are upset about the way that our labels are. And I'm like, because your labels come off when they take the cap off. That's why people are upset. Like, that's not a customer thing. Like, that's a you thing that you're not able to deliver on it. And sorry to go on a rant here, but so many people are just totally naive, and they'll look at like their 2 or 3 biggest competitors, and they'll go, "Well, this company's doing $1 million a month." And I'm like, "Yeah, they've got resources. They've got really smart people. They've got 5 years worth of sales history. Like, I don't care if you have 2% more of this ingredient in your product. The customer does not care."
So, one of the things that you said, and this is another thing that people just don't think about when growing their businesses, is they get into that comparison mentality, right? Like that business is doing a million a month.
I
And
should be doing 1 million a month. I'm better than them.
right? And
Like,
then it's like, cool. How much are they keeping? What is
well
their churn rate? Like
well,
what like are
yeah.
people just sending crap back? Like who cares that they're doing a million a month if it's costing them a million and a half,
I
right?
have to explain that to a lot of my customers, like, the top slot on Amazon is consistently losing money, and I'm like, "If you're willing to consistently willing and able," there's a big difference there,
Yeah.
willing and able to consistently lose money on Amazon, then sure, but that's not the strategy that we're gonna put you through. I just talked to this guy who's a real smart entrepreneur, and he's got a really good brand. He makes sauces, but he's like, "Yeah, we're the number 1 sauce in our category." I'm like, "That's amazing." I was like, "How is it going? Is it profitable?" He's like, "Oh, no, we lost $300,000 last year on Amazon." And I'm like, "Well, look, if you just love being that top spot and that's like what you want and you're able to support this, then sure, go for it. But that's not how I'm going to help you build your business. We're going to do it in a profitable and replicable way."
Yeah, 100%. So, at the end of the day, I think it's really important for businesses to know when and when not to compare to other businesses.
Hmm.
Finances is never personal or professional finances, never something to compare. Never something to compare.
Mm.
Things that you could compare are like, what's the messaging that my competitor has around the exact same product that I have, right? Because if they're talking about, oh, this I don't know, like this powder will help you lose weight 20 pounds in 30 days or whatever, right? And you don't have something like that on your messaging, your competitor might know, oh, people are looking to lose weight in the demographic that they're targeting. And so this is really important to include. You probably can't put that on a label.
You can't put any of that on Amazon anymore. Amazon has gone so hard on claims like that. You actually can't say anything on Amazon now. Like, you can't even say, like, anxiety relief because Amazon views anxiety as a medical condition. They're
Mm,
like, "You cannot make medical claims." Like, you can't even call it, like, a sleep aid because, inability to sleep is a medical condition. So they're like, unless you're a pharmaceutical, you cannot say those things. And obviously, you can't sell pharmaceuticals on Amazon. So yeah, if anybody's searching on Amazon and they're like looking for like sleep aids, and you're just like, none of these products say that they're a sleep aid. Well, that's one of the main reasons why is Amazon has like hacked every single claim you could make out at the knees.
mm.
Yeah.
Good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a new thing, and it actually came from the FDA, where the FDA just, like, sent these warning letters out where they're like, "All these companies are making medical claims," and Amazon's like, "We just don't want this beef, so we'll just, like, hack all the products out, and whatever's there is there. Good enough for us."
So the coaching industry is starting to receive. I'm drawing a blank on the word that I'm trying to use for this, but there have been more than
Scrutiny.
what was that?
Scrutiny, maybe.
Scrutiny, yeah, from the FTC, with
Mhm.
regards to a lot of messaging. There was one company specifically, I'm not going to mention the company name, um, but one company specifically that their claim was, "We'll help you double your sales in 30 days." And I actually went through that program, and man, will I say that was probably one of the best sales trainings I've ever went through in my life.
But did he double his sales in 30 days?
That was the training that I think took me to actually being able to close my first sale when I was doing sales in the online space. And hundreds of companies that used that training way more than doubled their sales.
Hmm,
But there were some companies that didn't.
right.
right? And it was those companies that complained and said, "Hey, we're not doubling our sales. Like, what's going on here?" And between that company and a couple of other big name marketing companies that made a lot of really, really bold statements, the FTC came cracking down, and there was a bunch of settlements that had to be done with some of these major coaching figures. To which one of those companies had to essentially get like fully dissolved.
Mm,
Um, and then I think, well, I mean, in like the last year or so, there's been so much change around messaging of coaching services. Some people still use really big, bold statements, but it's definitely not Facebook compliant anymore. So when the algorithm catches
uh,
it, it like bans their accounts.
mm.
Uh, and if the FTC catches you using it for one reason or another, you're going to be in some trouble. So
Marketing puffery, that's the term that I've heard. You can say, like, "World's greatest coffee," and it's like, "Okay, well, that's probably not something that we can crack down on."
it,
But doubling your sales in 30 days is a pretty specific claim. That's like the weight loss pill equivalent of like 30 pounds in 30 days. It's like,
yeah,
yo, you're going to have to prove that to me. Because if I like eat 5,000 calories a day and take these pills, I know I'm not going to lose 30 pounds. I don't even
yeah,
have 30 pounds to lose. Like, I would be sick. I would be sickly. I
yeah.
don't
You gotta
know,
go for
man.
it.
I don't know. It's hard for me to encourage like government to continue to jump in on some of these situations. I'm very like small government. I just don't believe that the government is great at regulating these things. I think the customer has a certain amount of responsibility to vet claims like that, right? But I think also, yes, there does sort of cross the line where a company is making claims that if they can't back up, I think it's totally legitimate that you would sue that company and say, hey, they made these claims, they can't back them up. I didn't get the delivery that they promised to me.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Good, bad?
No, yeah. So on the one hand, I'm probably like pro mid government, right? So like I don't think they should be tiny. I do believe that there should be some kind of body that oversees the protection of its people economically and safety wise and things like that in various capacities. But I'm in 100% agreement with you with you're someone who's interested in spending money on something that you've barely researched. Think again. Go do
Yeah,
your research and then buy into it.
yeah. The customer has to have some amount of personal responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Can't just be all on the company to that's marketing, dude. Like if I say you're gonna look good in this shirt and you're like, "Oh, I didn't get any dates," like, is that the t-shirt company's fault? Like, they're trying to sell you the t-shirt. There's certain things that go across that line, but I just I don't love that the government starts to draw those lines because I think that they're really bad at drawing those lines.
Yeah. There's definitely some improvement that could be made there.
So you own your business.
Mhm.
Talk to me about the lessons that you've learned now transitioning into being your own uh, independent entrepreneur and how that differs from working with other people's businesses.
Be patient. I think that because everything is instantaneous to us these days, maybe I won't speak on behalf of everyone. I'll speak on behalf of strictly myself, especially when it comes to my business. Information is so easy to access. Communicating with someone is so easy. Things can be done in seconds. There was a time, I have to humble myself. There was a time where I used to sit and listen to that stupid dial up noise for like 2 to 3 straight minutes
Oh yeah, I
before I
remember it.
can even type something into the browser. You remember like when the only time you could search the internet was you actually had to log into AOL's
AOL was sick,
app,
dude.
you know?
Yeah.
um, and for those of you that don't know what AOL is, if you're listening to this, America Online, like the OG internet way back when.
Mhm. Yep.
Um,
I had the AOL Messenger, dude. Me and my boys, we were messaging, me and the girls.
yeah, that was the way. That was the original messenger,
It
right?
was. What do you remember your screen name? Come on.
Yeah, I do. It's still it was like a nickname of mine. It was Ofirizer.
Not bad. Mine was Puma 12 King. ridiculous,
Did
but
you wear a lot of Puma shoes
I
because you were a
did.
soccer
I
player?
wore the soccer shoe. They had these cleats. They were called Puma Kings, and they were
Mm.
great. I wore them, and I was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm like a Puma brand rep."
One day they're gonna make a Netflix docuseries about you. Instead of Tiger King, it's gonna be Puma King.
No, I don't think you can have big cats in Ohio. Nor would I want one. I find those people to be wild. I have like a small cat. I don't know if you can see it, but he got me like real bad on the
Oh, I
arm
do see that.
just like a day ago. And I'm like, if you don't have a cat, like a small cat, I don't think you understand how unpredictable they can be at sometimes. Like my cat is super loving 95% of the time, but he will just flick a switch and just be like, "Nope, we're not in that mood right now. I'm gonna attack something."
Yeah.
Unpredictable. I'm not trying to have a 200-pound cat. Forget that.
But to go back to your initial question, um, sometimes we have to stop and not chase a result and
Mm,
allow ourselves to just know that if we remain consistent, that the result will happen. So be patient because it'll happen. I think that previously, this is something that I've learned in like when I've tried starting my own ventures over the years and then didn't work, like I would set really high goals and expectations because like, oh, 30 days, like that's so much time to be able to start a brand new business and like see it be profitable and like replace my income immediately, you know? And um I'm now much more of the mentality of the 1% rule.
okay.
Are you familiar with it?
I don't know if I am.
Cool. So if I were to tell you, if I asked you to, if your business is capable of growing 10% year over year, that's super doable, right?
That's a lot though, still,
Yeah.
nonetheless, but 10 depends where you are, right? If you're already doing 100,000,000, you're like, "Oh, geez."
Right. So yeah, so I guess at a certain threshold, it might be less than 10%.
It gets, harder to double your numbers once you go from 1,000,000 to 2,000,000 to 4,000,000
Yeah.
to 8, like
um, there's so much mentality around like trying to grow so much so fast
mhm,
that if you just implement something useful 1%, just like shift what you're doing and make it better by 1%
mm,
every day, then in theory, quote unquote, you end up growing 365% over the course of a year.
right, and compounds on itself too.
But if it compounds on itself, it's really more like 3000% when it
Mm,
compounds. So like don't chase an immediate result is what I keep having to tell myself. Like, just do a little bit better today, a little bit better today, a little bit better today.
mm,
And I know that at a certain point in time, the compounding of it all is just going to make that happen, that the next goal after that is going to happen faster. And
mhm.
like the collapse of time is something I'll naturally experience as the business grows instead of trying to chase for the big thing to happen now.
I have a lot of friends, specifically younger guys, who they'll get to doing something, and it'll sort of be working, but it's, like, not big enough yet for them. So they'll just stop and abandon it. Like one of my real good friend, he started this car detailing business and he actually worked at our company. He ended up quitting, started a car detailing business. He bought like a mobile setup. He had like a van. He was doing it all. And he was like doing 2 or 3 cars a day. He was going 6 days a week. Like he was doing a pretty legit business. And he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to get out of the car detailing business." I was like, "Why? Like, what are you doing?" Like, he made, like, $30,000 in profit. I was like, "This is pretty good for, like, a young kid." Um, and he's like, "Ah, I just, I don't it's just not for me, I don't know how to scale it." And now he, like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get into real estate." And I'm like he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna start, like, flipping houses." And he, like, kinda, like, bounced around that. He worked for a carpenter for a little while, and then he's like, "Yeah, I kinda figured it out." And now he's, like, selling windows, and I'm like, "Dude, like, you should have just stuck with that detailing business. It was working." And I've seen that so many times where people will just bounce from thing to thing to thing instead of being like, I have some traction to your point. Like, let me get 1% better. Like, let me hire an employee, let me get some processes, do all these different things. And 10 years from now, like, whether I'm still doing car detailing or a different business, I'm going to have learned so much. But when you give yourself 4.5 months to do something, you bounce out. It's like you're never gonna get there because you're expecting in 5 months to be rich. And dude, I got news. I'm 10 years in. I ain't rich. We've done some stuff, but we got another 20 years to go before we're like, oh, we've made it.
So that's the key right there, right? Like the real wisdom is in what the I don't know how old you are, nor do you have to tell me, but like I'm a
I'm
millennial.
32. I don't, yeah,
All
so.
right, cool. We're the same age. 31. Um, the real wisdom is like in what the people before us knew, which is it's a long-term game.
Mhm.
Like if you're people think people think that you can win or lose in Monopoly, and that's not the case. In Monopoly, the only
Mm,
way you win is if you stay on the board. So it's no longer about can I win or lose, and it's more about how long can I stay on the board. And if you can just think in terms of length, like know that like cool, this is where I'm at now and that's where I want to be in 10 years, then it like that mentality will help so much more than this is where I want to be tomorrow or next month, right?
mm.
Um, that's like there's so much wisdom in what financial experts have talked about the longevity of money, the longevity of business, and just thinking about it from like a year's standpoint, not a short term.
Last year, at the end of the year, we did the lessons that we learned through the podcast this year. And the number one lesson was the fast way is the slow way.
Mm,
So just like by all this like motion that you're trying to create, you're really slowing yourself down. To your point, if you can just don't overshoot it. Like you don't need to make a 10% jump today. Every once in a while, something remarkable will happen, and maybe you do land that huge client, and this was a 10% day. But if you're constantly shooting for that, you're gonna miss the 1%. So, uh, over the last year, I've started to like trade in the market a little bit more active trading. And it's so easy to be like, it's just like 1% a week. I just want to make 1% a week. But you get so excited about all these things. You're like, this is going to be so easy. And then you have like a negative 10% week. And you're like, like, what did I just do? Now you're like playing catch up. You're like, don't overshoot it, man. Just keep it simple. And Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, I love them. And I'm reading Munger's book, The Almanac of Poor Charlie.
mm.
And he's like, we do our management by sitting on our ass. He's like, we pick a couple of picks and then we just sit around and do nothing. He's like, but as an asset manager, you can't do that because you have to like, I got to show my client that, well, okay, we're in this fund and we're doing this, we're moving you out of this, we're changing things. He's like, if your fund manager was like, hey, we have 4 stocks, those are all we're in, and then you consistently are banging out like 8, 9, 10% return, you're like, why do I need this guy? He just bought me 4 stocks. That's it. Um, but it totally is that. And at some capacity, I think what you're describing is just do the little things, do them right. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every couple of months. Make those small improvements, find the right techniques and tactics and run with them, but run with them over a long period of time.
Fact.
Is there anything else that you think is necessary to cover with the coaching world, experiences you've had in business, the life lessons you've taken from them, important techniques and things that you think will help people move the needle?
Actually, yeah, there's one thing that comes up if it's cool, we dive into a little bit more of a topic.
Yeah.
A lot of people get very discouraged, and I experienced this myself in the online business space specifically. I don't know what it's like for brick and mortar, but there's a very heavy feeling of loneliness and social isolation when it comes to running a business, especially online. You might not have an office. You might be a solopreneur, right? And you're getting things off the ground, or maybe you have a small team and maybe it's remote. Um, and a lot of people talk about feeling alone in the process. And
Mm,
not many people actually go out of their way to see other people talking about it and making posts online and being like, "Hey, I feel that too. Let's connect. Let's hop on a call. Let's talk about our businesses. Let's grow together." Right? Like, let's be mutually beneficial for each other, not in terms of business sources, but as people, so that we don't feel this level of social isolation that the internet just naturally created unintentionally.
mm,
Um, so I think that uh, that's something that I definitely just wanted to throw out there. Like, when you see another entrepreneur online and you're feeling either lonely in your business or isolated or frustrated or whatever, anyone else you see online is probably feeling the exact same thing. Just be the first person to say hi. How you doing?
mm. Yeah, we work in office 100%.
Hmm.
I love it. I I don't think that I would do well being remote, but I think it would be even more difficult if you're like a one person shop.
Hmm.
And anytime you're connecting with someone, it's on a Zoom call and there's like, not to say there's an agenda, but my goal is to grow my customer base, client base, right? You're never just doing that thing like, hey, we're working on this thing together. That's one of the things I love most about this company. We got 30 people, and I think most of them feel like, hey, we're working on this project and we're working on it together. We got a team.
I love being remote.
Mm,
Love it tremendously. But I mean, I think it's because I am usually the guy that reaches out to people online and makes sure that like I'm still getting my social fix. Um, if people are local, I'll make an effort to go see them too, even if like I met them online first. But yeah, I've been online since 2019 or 2018, whenever it was, and I've loved every single minute of it.
I would love to be able to maybe like move to Mexico for like a couple of months, but
Mm.
we'll see. I got my 10-year sabbatical coming up, so we'll see if I actually put it to use or not.
uh,
Ofir, where can people find you, man? Where can they connect with you if someone out there is thinking about starting an online business, coaching business, leadership-based business, potentially get some help, understand more about what you do, or keep connected?
Yeah, so if you're looking to connect with me directly, email is the best way. My email address is Ofir, OFIR, that's OF as in Frank, IR, at straightshotops.com. That's
We'll
the
get
name
it.
of my company.
We'll get it in the show notes, of course.
Awesome. And then if you're interested in my latest venture on how to sell without selling, you can go to howtosellwithoutselling.com and you could sign up to the completely free training with zero pitch or call to action at the end of it. I promise, other than asking you for some feedback, which is what I do at the end of it. And it's a 30-minute training that should completely change the way that you sell to anyone, anything. And it's something that I've worked very hard to put together, and tried to make it as beneficial to humanity as I could.
Heck yeah. Ofir, man, I appreciate you. I love what you're doing, man. I wish you nothing but the best as you keep it rolling.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on.